And now on the line is Barry Grant from Extern Problem Gambling. Barry, welcome back to Near FM.
Thanks a million, Darren. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, Barry, today is our first interview on Near FM in nearly a year. In our last interview, we spoke about how the Gambling Regulation Bill 2021 had just been published. I believe that there was great news in this area last week. Can you tell our listeners, Barry, for those who don't know, about what the great news was that happened last week?
Well, there's the announcement of the new CEO of the Gambling Regulatory Authority being given the job. So it's a very senior civil servant called Marie Caulfield, who has previously been the head of the Residential Tenancies Board. So I suppose she'd be used to taking on some fairly big lobbyists and I suppose some interest groups in the form of landlords. So probably has a bit of form there and a bit of capacity for taking on the gambling industry as well, one would hope, as the new regulator. But that was a great piece of progress to see that happening, because we've been waiting for a very, very long time to see any movement on this.
Okay, this is great news. I saw that last week. Along with seeing the Gambling Regulatory Authority and CEO brought in next year, could you remind me, Barry, if there are any other big measures contained in the current gambling regulation bill that you think will or might make a big difference?
Yeah, there are quite a few. I mean, there would be one of the biggest ones that we are been, I suppose, pushing for is the implementation of a multi-operator self-exclusion scheme. So that would mean that if a person, say, wanted to stop gambling and they wanted to bar themselves from going to, say, local bookmakers or any bookmakers, they could register with an online service, give them their details. The service would make sure that the person is who they say they are, and then they would be barred from, say, bookie shops or online gambling platforms. And that the type of system already exists in the UK and other jurisdictions for many years. We don't have it here, and it would be really, really helpful for people who are trying to stop gambling. They're also talking about a complete ban on credit card gambling. That would be very, very important. That would help a lot of the people that we work with from getting into very serious trouble. We're talking about potentially setting a restriction on the amount of money that a person could lose in a specific period, and we already do see something like that with the National Lotteries online system in Ireland, where there's the daily limits, weekly limits, and monthly limits on what a person can spend in terms of their gambling there. And they're also looking at putting some sort of restrictions on advertisements, and I suppose the devil will be in the detail on that in terms of what that actually turns out to be in the end. But there's a lot of really positive stuff in there that would help a lot of people.
After our last interview on Near FM last year, Barry, around 6 months ago, I interviewed Senator Mark Wall from the Labour Party about legislation he has put down in the Oireachtas trying to get a ban brought in on gambling advertising in Ireland. Along with seeing the Gambling Regulation Bill and Gambling Regulatory Authority and CEO brought in, I would love if Mark's bill was passed also. Can you tell me, Barry, if there is any more news over the last few months on Mark's bill on advertising?
I think it might be at second stage. I think there are either 11 or 13 stages that a bill has to go through before it's enacted, so there's quite a way to go on it. But to kind of put it into perspective, the Gambling Control Bill as it was, which was published 9 years ago, never made it to second stage. So I suppose it's positive in that sense that it's made it further than the original Gambling Control Bill in a much shorter time frame. And I suppose what Senator Mark Wall is proposing is a complete ban on gambling advertising, which I think a lot of people will actually be in favour of that. The Journal ran a poll, I think last year, over 80, maybe 85% of people were in favour of a total ban on gambling advertising. So there's certainly a lot of people out there who will be in favour of that.
Yeah, a ban on advertising is happening with cigarettes, and there's going to be a big change with alcohol advertising as well. So I'd love if all alcohol and gambling advertising was banned, personally. Okay, Barry, I know that as well as being an advocate with Extern, that you are also an addiction counsellor. Uh, can you tell me how or if the cost of living crisis, if it is having a big influence or impact on the clients you talk to every week?
We haven't seen it yet, but I suppose the big bills are only really starting to come in for people. And like I mean, in my house, we haven't turned on the heating. Yes, I don't know if that's indicative of what other people are doing, but I suppose it's when we get into October, November, December, January, and people have the heating on and the big bills are coming in. That could be a really challenging time as people are kind of scrabbling around trying to find money to pay the types of kind of heating and electric bills that we've never really seen before. So I expect that we're going to see some problems with that coming down the line, but it's probably too early to say at this stage.
In our last interview this time last year, and the one interview before that as well, we talked about the impact COVID is having on problem gamblers. Are you still? Is the change the kind of COVID kind of influence on problem gambling? Is that kind of like, I know the worst of COVID hopefully is behind us, but have you noticed that change? Has it kind of embedded itself, or are we recovering, or what's the story like?
I think a lot of people moved online during the lockdowns, and a lot of people have stayed gambling online. Certainly, I mean, I was looking at the tax take, the betting duty take the other day for a piece of research I was doing, and the take in 2021, or sorry, no, in the current year, 2022, in the first 5 months of the year is way, way, way up. Now, Cheltenham could be part of that, but if it kind of keeps going, there will be a massive increase on the previous years. So that will be concerning, like during the lockdowns, the physical bookie shops were shut down. A lot of the kind of bookie shop owners are closing down a lot of the shops around the country because they're not nearly as profitable as online. And then when people move online, that's much, much more dangerous. It's 24/7
Mm.
availability. You don't have to deal with another human being. So that element of it, which was always happening anyway, the more and more people were moving online, was probably kind of supercharged by the lockdowns, and that'll be a worry.
That also goes to show, I believe, that the Gambling Regulation Act and Gambling Regulatory Authority are totally needed, and I would say that Mark Wall's bill is needed also. I will get in touch with Mark again soon with a view to doing a second interview with him about his legislation on Near FM, bearing in mind where we are with the Gambling Regulation Act. So hopefully that will put an extra layer or degree of pressure on the government to pass that legislation also. Okay, Barry, I'll be talking to you again on the FM over the next few months. Thanks very much, right?
Thanks a million, Darren. Take care.